At one time, the word on the street was Hackett was going to try to take over the Winter Hill gang and eliminate Howie Winter.
In this episode, I'm talking to Dana Owen, former MDC police officer and author of the book Shotgunned. Dana talks about being shot while pursuing a crew known as the 10 Hills Gang. You'll learn about bank heists, armored carjackings, and the political dynamics of organized crime in Somerville. So I've already given people an introduction to the book, Dana, and I talked a little bit about kind of Winter Hill, some of the role that they played in Somerville, and I made the distinction that the guys that we're going to talk about today are separate from that, but the fact that it's in Somerville, it does maybe have a little bit of an overlap. So
you're breaking up just a little.
Okay, can you hear me clearly now?
That's better.
Great. So the book that you wrote is called Shotgunned, and you were actually shot while on duty 1975?
Correct.
And you were pursuing a group that was out of they were called the 10 Hills Gang?
Yes, that's right.
Okay, so what were those guys actually robbing, or like what was the hijacking that they had done?
They had planned the job for a month. We found out they hijacked a leased postal truck containing $100,000 payroll heading for cash heading for Vermont.
So they found out that there was a truck that would have this cash in it, and they just caught the driver off guard and basically stole the truck?
Yeah, one of the people that we indicted was a postal worker, an inside worker, an uncle of one of the guys in the gang, and they blocked the Congress Street on-ramp with a car, and they hijacked the truck. Jimmy Hackett jumped in the truck with a revolver on the driver.
And what time of day did the hijacking happen?
About 6:30, 7 o'clock at night.
Wow. So they steal the truck, the call goes in, and you get in pursuit of this truck that they've stolen.
Yeah, there were actually two Edison workers working on a manhole who witnessed this. They used a phone that they had. They called Boston PD, who called the MDC police, where it was our jurisdiction, and we had the cruisers there. The call said that what we received that they were heading northbound, heading towards Route 93 in Somerville. My partner and I had just finished dinner, and I was driving, which I pretty much always did, and we headed up to the Mystic Avenue on-ramp, which actually is no longer there on 93. Okay,
and but you're not sure that this is who is the correct car, who these guys are?
Yeah, we never saw a car, and I've been on the job for 5 years. I knew that a follow car was used in almost every hijacking, and never saw it, but when the truck went by, there were two white males in the truck, and you never saw that in 1975. That was highly unusual, so on a hunch, I started following them up 93 in Somerville.
And as you get in pursuit of them, reading in the book, you really go into the details of how the chase went down, when they got off the off-ramp, and at what point were you guys shooting towards them first, or did they initiate fire?
No, after they get out of the truck into the now getaway car, they turned off at Montville Avenue, and they made with four good-sized guys in the car, they made a screeching left-hand turn, and I got right up behind them. I said to my partner, put a couple in the rear window before they start shooting at us, because the radio call, we knew that they were armed. My partner leaned out the window to shoot, and a car came down the ramp from 93 with the stop sign, and it was actually a woman and her kids, and all my partner saw in his sights was about a 6-year-old girl watching us chase these guys. So the decision was made then he wouldn't shoot, and basically by myself also.
And after you had shot out the windows, they started to return fire to you?
Well, they didn't return fire. We never fired.
Oh, okay. Oh, you decided not to shoot out the windows.
Right. It was too dangerous to shoot. There were too many bystanders. Like I said, this car with a girl in it got in between us. When we came up to the intersection at Montville Avenue and Washington Street, there was a cruiser and a police officer there, and I thought that was going to be the end of the chase. It was a roadblock. However, the police officer, a woman police officer, waved them through, and they took a left onto Washington Street.
Got it.
I found out later that they were flashing their high beams. The car they had was a Ford that looked like an unmarked police car, and without my siren going, he thought it was a detective's car. That's why he waved them through.
And do you think that was a strategy why they used that type of car to begin with?
Say that again?
Do you think it was a strategy that they used that type of car thinking maybe it could be?
Yeah, we found out later on that was their favorite car to use because it looked like a police car, and they were four-door LTDs.
Right, I knew people that used to drive Crown Victorias because they wouldn't get pulled over because people would think they were cops.
Yeah, also they were very easy to steal. To pop the ignition, all you needed a dent puller and a screw, and put it into the ignition and pop them out. They were, back then in Somerville and Medford, that was the most popular car to steal.
So you said something once, and it was that if it was a bank robbery, you would check in Charlestown, and if it was a hijacking, you would check Somerville.
Yeah, it just got to, if it was a bank robbery, they were from Charlestown. So they would radio to us and the Mass State Police and to Somerville, and we would set up roadblocks on the ramps, because if the chase went up 93, they were going to turn around and try to get back into either Somerville if it was a hijacking or Charlestown if it was a bank robbery.
Right. And how did most of this connect to the higher level of organized crime? Was it they would have to get approvals before they could commit these robberies? Would they have to give notice? Would they have to get payouts?
As we conducted the investigation, if they were involved with the then Winter Hill gang, they would have to get approval. However, as the investigation went on, we found that they were kind of rogues and they were working on their own. They were working out of the 10 Hills Cafe, which was on Mystic Avenue in Somerville.
Okay. And who were the guys involved in this robbery, the one where you were shot?
The four suspects were James Hackett, John Grider, Richard Murnane, who was the wheelman, and the fourth subject, first name, was David Toppy, and that was later changed to Jimmy Hackett's brother, Peter.
Okay. Were any of these guys former military?
Grider was a former Marine, and I think some of them were. It's hard to get their backgrounds, but I know from talking, we had a pretty good bunch of informants. They said most of these guys came back screwed up from Vietnam, especially Grider.
Yeah, I had heard that Grider did, I think, 3 tours in Vietnam.
Yeah, I think so. Like I said, I did a lot of work. Very hard to get their backgrounds. They all claimed that they were roofers or wall plasterers, but they were all bank robbers, basically.
So it's crazy for me to think now, back then in the 70s, that there were guys running around and they were actually pulling these robberies off. They had guns. They were shooting in the streets. Was the city in general just a rougher, tougher place?
Somerville was known to have the Winter Hill gang, but they did some crimes in Somerville that we really believed, once we looked at what they were doing, there was no way they could be connected to the Winter Hill gang. However, we still weren't sure. Right. They did 4 bank robberies. 2 of them were at the Century Bank, which is right next door to the 10 Hills Cafe. And with Howie Winter running the Winter Hill gang back then, you did not do a robbery in Somerville. That was totally out of the question. So it started looking more and more like they were just rogues. At one time, the word on the street was Hackett was going to try to take over the Winter Hill gang and eliminate Howie Winter.
And Jimmy Hackett was kind of the real extreme of violence and being out of control.
Yeah, he was the leader of the gang. They had a pretty good-sized crew that worked out of the 10 Hills Cafe. They had people that could take each other's place. They had a couple of wheelmen. They had other guys that could wheel guns. They rented the stolen cars. They rented the guns. They rented disguises. It was very well organized. Each job they planned for about 30 days, and the bank robberies were held about 30 days apart.
And another robbery that they pulled off was the Hilltop Steakhouse. Was that the 10 Hills Cafe guys?
Yeah, when we were investigating, I worked on this case on my own, as it says in the book, and then I got assigned to the U.S. Postal Inspectors on special assignment to work on the case when the 5-year statute of limitations was running out. And I often sat on the Ten Hills Cafe. And I was sitting on it one night, and there was a Ford, and 3 guys came out of the Ten Hills Cafe and hopped in it and took off, so I started to follow them. I followed them up to the Hilltop Steakhouse. And I thought they were going to go in and have a steak. It was one of my favorite restaurants. And suddenly they turned around in the parking lot, hit Route 1 in Saugus, and started heading southbound. So I started following them, trying to stay back far enough and not get made. And there was no question of mine. They were doing a timed run. They were seeing how long it was going to take them to get there and how long to get back to the Ten Hills Cafe where they went. It was dark. There were 3 guys. I couldn't identify anybody, but I had a good idea of who it was. I reported it to my job to the MDC detective unit, and I think they really didn't believe me. They said, "Well, that's a good job, kid. That's good intelligence information. We'll mark that down." About 2 weeks later, on October 3rd, 1975, they held up the Hilltop Steakhouse, and Jimmy Hackett shot and killed the Wells Fargo guy. Shot him in the back with a revolver while he was carrying 2 bags full of money.
And John Grider was shot in that robbery too, yeah?
Yeah, the Wells Fargo guy, despite the fact he was shot through the heart, turned around, returned fire, and hit Grider in the stomach.
And they ended up dumping Grider on the streets back in Somerville.
Yes, I ended up interviewing Grider later, and he wanted to go to his sister's house, and they dumped him in front of Somerville Hospital on the street.
So after you had been shot, did you know who it was? I mean, obviously, maybe there may have been 1 or 2 guys that you weren't sure of, but did you know it was the crew coming out of Ten Hills Cafe?
Positively.
And how frustrating was it for you to know that these guys were out there, that they were still committing crimes, and that you couldn't just take them down?
Extremely frustrating, especially when they hit the Hilltop. And the Wells Fargo guy they killed lived in North Reading, where I lived at the time. Married kids.
If they had listened to you and recon, you could have.
That bothered me a lot. I used when I sat outside the Ten Hills Cafe, and I'm sure you remember it back then, or your dad does. They always had a lookout. Always. There was always a lookout out there looking for cops. Always. Might have been some young kid wanting to be a gangster someday, but there was always somebody standing out there.
Right. And how close? Because I know that Ten Hills was kind of famous for cocaine, and how much did that tie in? Were Hackett and all those guys, were they selling coke too, or was it just...
Not to my knowledge. And I won't get into who they were, but we had 2 informants that we basically knew everything they were doing.
Right.
Unfortunately, we usually knew it after they did it. But the informants told us that they were snorting coke and drinking beer. That was their thing. I don't think they were into selling drugs and stuff like that. I'd never heard that.
And did it take like real restraint, especially knowing where these guys were, to not just, go by one night and take them out?
Yeah, we saw him doing a gun deal one day, and there were 4 of us in the car, in the surveillance car. We probably could have taken him, but in the back of my mind, knowing the newspapers in the Boston area, if I did that and they found out I'd been investigating this case for 5 years, they would have thought that was basically I hit them. It wasn't a legitimate thing. So the decision was made that until we indicted them, they were off limits for us to go in and take it or arrest. And we just wanted the surveillance. Maybe we could catch them doing another job. But it was tempting, but I wasn't going to lower myself to what their standards were. Yeah.
Well, I didn't even mean to have them arrested. I meant, to pull out a gun and...
Oh, I'm talking about just going in and they draw their guns, and if we went in more heavily on them, we'd take them down. That was thought of several times, but made the wise decision not to do that.
Yeah. So how does this start to unravel a little bit? So these guys have a crew together. They're successfully pulling off these robberies. They robbed, how many banks and armored cars, and then when does it kind of start to crumble?
Well, they were interviewed by the FBI numerous times, by the state police. Hackett would basically laugh at him. He knew they had nothing on him. When he went to trial, he was found not guilty of the murder, even though Grider testified against them. They had threatened all the witnesses. I was there when they were basically running the courtroom, threatening witnesses. I actually did a talk years ago on my book, and a couple came up to me afterwards and said, "We read your book. It's amazing. Just want to tell you, my wife was on the jury. Bad guys came to our house, threatened her life, and we sold the house and moved right after the trial."
Wow.
That's how organized they were at the time. And then what finally happened was Hackett went to the Baltimore Post, the VFW Post, which Bobby Martini's father, Bobby Martini Sr., ran court on the barroom. He made sure everybody was straight. He either worked for or was a good friend of Howie Winters. Hackett went in there drunk, got in a big argument. Bobby Martini threw him out of the place, and he went to the Ten Hills Cafe. Our informant told us he picked up a sawed-off shotgun and a handgun with a new player that came on the scene. They went back there, went in, and he shot Martini in the stomach, on the side of the stomach. And there was a contract put on him after that, and that's when things started to fall apart for the Ten Hills gang.
Because they crossed the line, and not only when it...
Well, yeah, he crossed the line and he shot one of the well-liked people of the Winter Hill gang.
Yeah, so I spoke to Bobby, we did an interview about his book, Citizen Somerville, and he tells that story. So it was a wild connection for me to read that in your book and then also read it in his, how much all this stuff kind of intertwined in little old Somerville.
Yeah, Bobby and I are good friends. When Bobby was writing the book, he interviewed me, and I still was a little paranoid from working undercover on that case for so many years, even though it was older, and I wouldn't let him use my name in the book. I said, just put in there the cop that Hackett shot, which he did.
Yeah.
So we had something in common. I got shot by Hackett, and Hackett shot Bobby's father.
So this is a really strange tie-in for me that shocked me. But when I was reading the book, I would talk to my dad about it because he was a regular at Ten Hills. He used to hang out at Ten Hills Cafe, and he was never into any of that stuff. But he knew Grider and he knew Hackett, and I was walking him through some of the stuff that I read in the book, and one of the names that I recognized, it was a guy named Michael Crimmon. And Michael Crimmon was good friends with him, and it said that the FBI went to question Crimmon about the gun that was used in the shooting. And my dad,
I changed the name of him and David Donahue in the book. When I wrote the book, it's 100% true. I didn't want to start getting far afield. I wanted to stick to the Ten Hills gang. What happened was David Donahue bought the gun, and he bought 2 shotguns in Burlington at a sporting goods store. One of them I was shot with. It was an Ithaca pump that they sawed off. The other one that they went to the Baltimore Post was a double-barrel shotgun that was sawed off. When the MDC detectives and the postal inspectors went to their house, Donahue said, well, I gave the gun to Crimmins. So they went to Crimmins' house. Crimmins went through a phony search, couldn't find the guns, and said, shit, somebody stole them.
So one of the tie for that story with me is my mom was dating Michael Crimmon at the time, and she was in the apartment when the FBI showed up. And she was the one that they originally questioned about where the guns were. So
yeah, they were actually federal postal inspectors, but you would think they were FBI.
Right. So I never knew any of that. And my dad said, well, guess who they talked to when they went there? So that was a big surprise for me.
Yeah, I got to know some of the people that knew them. Certain guys were liked, certain guys weren't liked. Hackett just got whacked. He was doing drugs. He was doing coke and drinking beer. He was going crazy. He killed a Wells Fargo guy for nothing. They easily could have disarmed him and taken the money, and that would have been it. Because they told to give up the money because it's insured. And I interviewed. You read in the book. I interviewed one of the guys from the Wells Fargo thing, and like me back then in 1975, I didn't wear my vest because it was too hot and too uncomfortable. And he didn't believe in carrying a shotgun, so he's just walking out of there with money bags out of Giuffrida's office, and Hackett puts a gun to his back and kills him.
And how much did they get away with, do you know?
$57,000.
And it was 4 guys or 3 guys in that robbery?
There were at least 3. There was a rumor there was a 4th, but I never could hear that. And Grider told us when we interviewed him that he never got any of the money. That they went to a party for one of the Hacketts or something like that.
So Grider was the one who was shot and kind of left for dead on the street. And not only...
Yeah, his buddies left him on the street to die, basically.
Left, he didn't get his payout either.
Right.
And he turned, so he testified against Hackett because of that.
Yes, he testified against him in a hilltop, but his lawyer, Howie, who was a sleazebag, managed to get him out because, like I said, they threatened all the witnesses.
And I think Grider was actually, wasn't he attacked in prison? Didn't they try to kill him in jail?
When he pled guilty to second-degree murder, there was a deal made with his lawyer and the state that he would not do Walpole time, because at the time he would have been killed in Walpole without a doubt, because there was a contract on him that the Hacketts put out. So he went to Norfolk prison. Unfortunately, he got in a fist fight with somebody, and they threw him into Walpole. I don't have the exact dates and stuff like that, but within a matter of days, he was stabbed in the stomach and almost killed.
So these guys turned on each other pretty quickly.
Yeah, and then they started transferring him from different prisons because obviously they were going to, there was an active contract and they were going to whack him. So he testified against them. The jury, got threatened, and he was in bad shape after that. And Hackett walked free.
Wow.
And then they had another guy that was the wheelman named Richard Murnane, and he fled to Arizona. Was arrested a couple times, jumped bail every time, and much to our amazement, myself and the postal inspectors, they no-prossed him on the murder and they let him go.
Yeah. I know that you were able to sit down with Howie Winter, who ran the Winter Hill Gang for years. Do you, if I had to ask you, are those guys good guys or bad guys? How does that fall for you?
I worked with Ron Goldman. If you remember Ron, he was a major crime reporter for HDH in Boston. He was my mentor on the book. I actually started this book after talking with Bobby Martini. He was writing his book, and I said, I've thought of writing a book for a long time. Time to sit down and do this. So as I'm writing the book, Ron being my mentor, we would work back and forth, and this went on for years. Started in 2008 when I kind of retired. I worked for a couple of gun companies for 13 years. Ron said, look, this is true crime. I hired a lawyer. I wanted everything to be exact, not make any mistakes. And he said, are you sure these guys were not Winter Hill guys? I said, 100% sure? No. He said, well, why don't you reach out to Howie Winter and we'll sit down and talk to him. I said, yeah, how do I do that?
Right.
So I thought about it. I knew somebody that was actually related to him, to Mr. Winter, but that didn't work out. I approached my friend Bobby Martini, and after some negotiating back and forth, I took Mr. Winter out to lunch along with Bobby and Ron Goldman in 2010. It was a fascinating meeting. You've got a retired gangster, a retired cop, and a retired reporter. I asked him, I said, Mr. Winter, can I call you Howie? He said, sure. The rules were we could talk about anything but a murder. Obviously, murders have a no end to the statute of limitation. I found him to be articulate, very intelligent, had an amazing memory, and he was a very likable gentleman.
And keeping in mind all the stuff that sort of came before that, do you think that they were a positive and negative force just in the community at large? Because
it was kind of before my time. One thing, when I was a young cop, and you had the organized crime gangs, or you had the Irish gangs or the Italian gangs, those cities were pretty safe. And as far as when I was investigating this case, if in fact they were Winter Hill guys, there's no way they were going to reach out to an honest cop and whack an honest cop. That doesn't happen. There were rules back then. Nowadays, God love the cops nowadays, there's no rules. Nobody stands behind them. You're dealing with drug gangs most of the time. And things have changed. But I found Howie to be a very interesting individual. I've read a lot about his past and everything. I've seen some things about him, but it was very interesting and enjoyable to sit and talk to him for a couple of hours.
Yeah, no, I think honestly, anybody that talks to him, it is a privilege to at least get the inside scoop on that stuff.
Yeah, it was, like I said, it was, after being involved in this, and that could have been Winter Hill guys, it was fascinating.
Did he share any of his disdain for Hackett with you?
I asked him about the Hacketts. And matter of fact, Ron asked him. He says, the word on the street was Jimmy Hackett was going to whack you, and he just smiled. That didn't faze him at all. He wasn't worried about that. He said, I'd done some business with his older brother, and that's all they had to do with the Hacketts. His older brother is now deceased. Like I said, I stayed away from anything that I couldn't prove. Everything that I put in the book was documented. The trial was documented, and I just wanted to keep it straightforward. I don't like bad-mouthing people that are dead either. That's just not my style. I see that in too many books that decide on what they were like when they were alive, and they have no idea. I don't care for that.
Wow. Yeah, no, I think that's pretty honorable of you to keep the higher ground on that.
Right.
So, the book is available on Amazon.
Correct.
I think is it $15 or $16?
$15.99.
$15.99.
It's also available on Kindle through Amazon. If you have a Kindle, that's not something I do.
Okay.
And if you're an Amazon Kindle Prime member, you can get it for free.
Oh, that's great. And it's Shotgunned by Dana Owen. You can easily find it. You can Google it also. One other piece of that is, so Hackett, after shooting Bobby Martini Sr., ended up in Florida, but then ultimately he ended up in the Middle East?
Yeah, we were tailing him. We were just behind him, and he was actually stopped in Florida for speeding in a rented car, but whatever name he gave or whatever ID he had at the time, you could get a really good fake license from the registry for about $200 back then. No problem. And he got free of that. Then he moved around. He actually came back to Somerville a few times. Bobby and I talked to Bobby about that. We had informants that saw him even when the contract was out.
Because Bobby and all those
they
guys
almost whacked him one night, but he was riding with one of the guy's younger brothers, and that's a story we heard from an informant. And like I said, most of the time the informant's telling you the truth. If they aren't guys that are trying to get a lesser jail sentence, if they're trying to make a plea bargain with you, usually they're lying through their teeth.
Right.
But he ended up going to Kuwait, of all places.
How did he tie in to get to Kuwait? Do you know the backstory on that?
He somehow tied in with a alleged jewel thief. We don't know if that was in Florida or what, who was a Kuwaiti. And with another guy that joined the Ten Hills gang, matter of fact, the one that was with him the night he shot Mr. Martini, they got phony passports, they got phony everything because of their connections, and they flew to Kuwait. They did a jewel heist with this Kuwaiti, who actually turned out to be an informant for the Kuwaiti police, and they were arrested. I've got a picture of them. They were posing with a toy gun and masks that they wore when they did the heist over there, and got no money out of it.
Dana, are you on Facebook? If someone wanted to follow you, could they do that?
Yeah, I'm on Facebook. My Facebook page is Shotgunned.
Okay, Facebook page is Shotgunned. Yeah, if you have any good pictures, obviously we'll share some of them, but I'm sure people would love to see anything that you have. If you wanted to.
Yeah, there's a lot of them on my Facebook page. If you go back, I think I started it in 2014. it was back then when you wrote a book, you had to have it printed yourself. And I had a web page back then, and I was selling the books myself. I sold well over 1,500 books through Facebook. I've got, I think I got 1,135 followers right now, and I come out with things whenever I can, and it's been a great tool for me. And a lot of people have given me a lot of comments, positive comments on the Facebook page.
And do you think there's, to me, I mean, this is, a real like Hollywood drama. Do you think that there's an opportunity for this to get picked up?
Yeah, that's a very interesting thing. I recently have been contacted by a Hollywood screenwriter, producer, Richard DeVideo, and he has optioned my book, and he's developing it for the screen. The interesting thing is, Rich is from Somerville, and like you, his dad knew most of these bad guys.
Yeah, I think if you recognize the names in this book, it takes on a whole other layer for people that are reading it.
Exactly, but I'm very excited. He has done some really nice things. He did a screenplay, a movie called The Call with Halle Berry in 2013, and that I think the box office was like 62 or 68 million dollars. And he did another one in 2015, The Forger, with John Travolta and Christopher Plummer. So for him to reach out to me, I was stunned, let's put it that way.
Yeah. Well, Sam Metler, I don't know if you heard, he called in, the producer of, what's the show, Kim?
Intervention.
Of Intervention. He asked in the comments if anyone had bought the rights to your story.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and he's in L.A., and so... maybe...
Right now, he has it. We've signed a contract with him. It's called a shopping agreement, and he has exclusive rights to it for a little over a year, and I believe he told me he wants to make something special out of it, and I believe he's going to, so it's just right now. Would you say you had a caller that asked you if the rights were available or something like that?
Purchased
You broke up just a little bit.
To the book already. Did you hear me, Dana?
No.
Oh, I said, I'm sorry. Yes, so someone, Sam had asked if someone had purchased the rights to the book already.
Interesting.
But I think you...
I mean, not because it's my story, but I work with Ron Golubin, and near the end, the last year, I worked with a woman named Athena Yaganian, who worked for Bill Bratton several times. I knew her. She was a civilian that had a crime company and did statistics and computer stuff for police departments, and I'd worked with her off and on during the years. I hadn't seen her in a long time, and Ron and I kind of stalled about 4 years into the book, and we needed somebody to edit it, and you can't edit your own stuff, and she did a remarkable job of putting it together. She knows the police jargon, so if we use the police term in parentheses, we'd put what that means after that. And the team effort worked out really well. And we quietly met Richard DeVideo over the Christmas holiday in the Somerville Mall and had breakfast with him, and I had a really nice, productive meeting. Really nice guy. I really like the guy.
Yeah, that's exciting. After reading the book and the story, I would love to see it go further. I think there's so much to...
Same here.
Yeah, right.
I'd be thrilled.
Well, honestly, good luck with that, Dana, and I appreciate you calling in. I appreciate you telling us your story and about the book. Again, the book is Shotgunned. It's available on Amazon.
Yeah, if you go to, the best way to find it on Amazon is where the search bar. Type in Shotgunned and then my name, Dana Owen, and the book comes right up.
DanaOwen, Dana Owen.
Correct. Yeah,
Great.
Correct.
All right, Dana. Well, thank you again. That was an incredible interview. I learned a lot more, and it was so nice for me after reading it to get to talk to you and kind of hear the first-person account.
I appreciate it. I appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, absolutely. And we'd love to talk to you again because there's so much of this stuff. You're great.
Yeah,
done so much research.
That sounds good.
To and ask if stuff's the real deal.
I'm happy to do whatever I can. I'd be happy to do.
Great. Thanks, Dana.
Thank you.